Okay, Movember 2025, another video I'm going to put to you tonight is addiction and how can we help. It can be a pretty challenging experience when there's addiction in a family system, and what do you do? How can you be useful? It seems like at the time everything you do can be out of whack and not very useful. So here's some information from a variety of sources to help guide a family member or loved one in a very difficult situation. So I'll try and cover what is an addiction, am I an addict, why do people use addictions, where does it come from, how can I help, and where can I get help. So, am I an addict? It's a difficult question. A lot of people don't know. We use the word really casually. It's not really a diagnostic word. If you go to your doctor, they're going to go to the DSM as like a statistical manual that helps them with diagnoses. And addiction, the word is not found. You'll find it in the Webster's dictionary. And now, person to person, we use it all the time. Oh, wow, I'm addicted to this series on Netflix, or I'm addicted to chocolate, or I'm addicted to Candy Crush. And we sort of know what that means, right? I think most of the time you would think, well, that person's probably not at the fridge at 3 a.m. gorging on chocolate, or they're not staying up for 48 hours in a row playing Candy Crush, or they're not on Netflix, for 3 weeks straight or something. We get what it means. They're staying up a bit late. They're doing it a bit much, right? But for some of us, we need to ask the question in a more serious tone. And so, am I using something, right? Am I owning it? Is whatever I'm doing sort of pretty manageable? And so in the work of Rob Weiss, I'll probably put a little video as a standalone video on porn addiction out of Roberts. It might be hard for me to find. I haven't got it. Oh yeah, I have got it right in front of me. I think I mentioned it in the other video I did, but he uses a version of this probably much more professionally than me. But so to use porn as an example, as a use issue, casual users and casual users find porn enjoyable, but it's not as satisfying as real life sexuality, and as such their interest can really, and it won't be sustained. So we can use something, but we can put it down. We own it, it doesn't own us. Then you can get to an abuse of something. So yeah, we might be addicted in it if we're staying up too late, but it's a symptom, not a problem. So we might be avoiding a challenging situation at work or in our relationship. And so we could be abusing something for a while. Alcohol can be like this. We are relying on it a little much. We're drinking a bit more than we should. We don't meet the criteria of alcoholism, but with an alcohol diary and some counseling to look at the underlying issues, people can generally pull that back into place. But then we get addiction, right? And users that identify with addiction. So what's that mean? So addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experience. People with addictions use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. Addiction is a disorder of self-regulation. Individuals who become dependent on addictive substances can't regulate their emotions, self-care, self-esteem, or relationships. If you're in a relationship with someone that struggles in these areas, you'll see these things. Now, Johann Hari, who wrote Stolen Focus and had a very famous viral TED Talk, made the observation that so the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. That could be a starting place for your to sort of get off the addiction, but it's human connection. It's connecting to others, and that's what we see in the use of 12-step fellowships and support groups. So a criteria of addiction, and I've got this little twisted in a second, but all the information's there. Patrick Carnes breaks it down to 5 things. Compulsive use: if the alcohol or drug is available, the addict uses too much of it and uses it often. Impaired control: when the addict tries to use, control is lost, and usually a single use is followed by many more, as is often heard in Narcotics Anonymous: 1 is too many, 1,000 never enough. In AA, sometimes the awareness is, wow, it's the first drink that gets me drunk. Once I have that first one, I can't predict when I'm going to stop. Continued use in spite of consequences. Addicts keep using drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling, even when it causes health, relationships, jobs, or legal problems. this is one of those phenomenons. And other people look in and go, what are you doing? This is crazy. But, I don't know what's going on. There's a phenomenon of craving. The desire for alcohol, gambling, sex, or a drug can change in intensity from minute to minute. It can even disappear in periods of abstinence. But using even a tiny amount can wake up the cravings and trigger continued use. And this is where every addict I've ever met's had a stop story. They stop for a month, a year, 2 years, sometimes a long period of time. But then they go back to it or have a little, and the phenomenon of craving kicks back in. Now, people, places, and things, right, can trigger cravings. So we got to watch out for that. I mentioned that in the video yesterday. Generally, we have a powerlessness, not over addiction, but people, places, and things that trigger it. I gave an example in that video around going past an old place I got drunk in many decades before. Well, it was 35 years earlier, and still remember it triggered that euphoric recall. I didn't feel like using, but the euphoric recall was triggered. So people, places, and things associated with use in the past can wake up the craving. We need to watch out for that. The last is for the criteria of addiction is denial. There is a saying in addiction that addiction is the only disease that tells you that you don't have it. And if you've ever been in relationship with someone with an addiction, it's pretty frustrating. They can't see it, but Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder can. So denial, all right, the degree that an addict can minimize use and its consequences is one of the most striking and common manifestations of addiction, as well as the most baffling to others. That's a Patrick Kahn's quote. Breaking through this denial is the important component of addiction treatment. Now, in both Patrick's books, Facing the Shadow and Facing Addiction, his first chapter is we need to get down to what is real. We've got to deal with what is real, because the break through the denial and delusion. So, why do people use addictions? There can be a variety of causes. Addiction is an intimacy disorder. We've generally got some sort of attachment injury, and we're using to feel less, as Rob Weiss says. So it's an illness of escape. Its goal is to obliterate, medicate, and ignore reality. It's an alternative to feeling hurt, betrayal, worry, and most of all, loneliness. You never underestimate a person's abandonment pain if they've got attachment issues. It cripples the ability to know what's real. We really start to even I'll probably do one on the addiction cycle, and the addictive cycle can, if you get to ritualization, obsession and ritualization, it distorts reality and induces trance. It weaves a string of rationalizations and delusions, and it makes it impossible to cope with details like jobs and families. You see people, they don't cope well with everyday life. Little things just keep getting under their skin, and what do? They go for the relief of the addiction, to escape that, to feel less. Now, this image, I remember, I don't know if I can make this bigger, but I'll give it a go. I'll just blow that up so if you're watching this video, you can pause it and have a look at that. But I will go back to, let me just see if I can go back here to floating mode. So, on here, it's talking about early life exposure, depending on what the addiction is. I was talking to a gentleman today, and his first exposure was his father's Playboy magazines, and they were hidden from the family. Dad didn't tell anyone about it, but he was an inquisitive young lad, age 10, found the mother lode. And it was the beginning of secrecy, dishonesty, not telling someone about his secret basement, and, going to those images to distort reality, induce trance, and escape just the pain that he was going through at the time. His curiosity got him in there, but it became a rescue for him. So whether it's, the teen drinking or smoking or drug use or internet use, gambling, it doesn't matter what it is, but there was an early exposure. Sometimes we can have some adult traumas and life stresses that ramp up, midlife, illness, death, calamity, and we can turn to an addiction. It can be part of our genetics. I was, when I found my birth mother, I had a genetic alcoholism, and I believe that to be something that I'll have to just remain sober for the rest of my life. Childhood trauma and stresses, if it's not one thing, it's your mother. It's a bad joke, I know, but Eddie Caparucci's book, Going Deep, is about the road to recovery from his sex addiction is through your childhood. So it's looking at early experiences of growing up in stress or less than nurturing behavior, the adverse childhood experiences study is very famous for bringing that to the general public, that what happened in childhood can fuel an addiction. Our attachment disorders and looking at early life attachment and failure to thrive in intimacy. And learning and modeling. If we've grown up in a family home where there's been addictions present or a way of operating present, if people have relied on smoking, vaping, drugs, alcohol, gambling, you start to see and pick up that way of operating. So there can be a variety of ways people end up turning to an addiction, and that's what therapy can help with. Now, when you're supporting somebody, there's a couple of words that you'll see out in the world today. One is codependence. Now, the family systems model of understanding alcoholism was very popular. Sharon Wedgeider Cruz, the family systems theory and I think that does hold some water, and in some family systems that approach, the adult children of alcoholics, the Al-Anon 12-step fellowship, we can be drawn into supporting people in a way that makes us ill, and we can benefit from some of those tools. And then there's Rob Weiss wrote a very famous and helpful book in our community looking at prodependence, that we shouldn't throw anyone under the bus that looks like they might fit that model, but they actually are going above and beyond to help a loved one, and he calls that prodependence, and I'll describe that in a minute. So, codependence, the co-addict, it's a trauma-based theory of human dependency. The partner puts other needs ahead of their own, and sometimes that can be a trauma repetition from their own childhood. That there's a desperate desire for approval seeking by seeking out and becoming attached to troubled people. So we might even across a crowded room pick out that person, where other people might find their troublesome behaviors or addictions overwhelming or not very attractive. We can be drawn to help them very quickly. It can be driven by low self-esteem and very damaged personal boundaries. So we get in deep real fast and think that our value, we've got this low self-esteem, less than, better than, that gets triggered by if I'm useful to you, I'm valuable. And that we feel that they can and should resolve the addict's problem. So that's the enmeshment, the damaged boundaries in action. Now this happens. I don't think the prodependency model throws this out, because some folks, this was the operating system they saw in a family systems model, and they've gone out seeking, looking, and ending up there. Now, I appreciate that needs a certain sort of help. Prodependence, right, is an attachment-based theory, states a partner of an addict is a loving person caught up in circumstances beyond their ability to healthily cope, and attempts to help or a healthy attempt to remain connected to a loved one facing extraordinarily different circumstances or difficult circumstances. And they need to be supported and celebrated, not pathologized. Now, I really appreciate that. And one of the criticisms of Rob's model was treatment centers that pathologize people instantly. If you've got someone in there for an addiction, then they look at you through that codependent lens and assume you're in denial and treat you accordingly. And I agree that is less than helpful. Those people need to be really supported and championed, that you went above and beyond. And believe me, if you love an addict of any description, we go above and beyond. And so that having an understanding of prodependence is really important. I would also argue that having an understanding of codependence, and if you suffer from that family systems sort of theory, then Al-Anon or Codependence Anonymous could be a really useful intervention in your life as you go side by side helping another person. So, personal spiritual growth, isolation to regulation. We need to create safety and be present. Treating addiction as treating trauma, largely. Prayer and meditation can be really helpful if you're a spiritual or a Christian person or have a faith system. Exercise, nutrition, and sleep. I mention that regularly. It is the core of human health. If we do not look after ourselves, this organ, our body, doesn't function properly. It took me a long time to learn it. Good sleep, good nutrition, good exercise is critical for good well-being. Learning how to ground yourself, because addicts are very chaotic and they're usually not regulated. So we've got to learn grounding techniques, whether it's sighing. Andrew Huberman talks about the way that we can seek relief from stress from sighing, meditation, different things that we do to ground ourselves to stay regulated. Box breathing is a really accessible tool you can use. I know in the compassion fatigue information they talk about box breathing and clenching your pelvic floor muscles and releasing, clenching and releasing, using your eyes to go peripheral and back. All those things can be good tools. Shrinking your inner and outer critic. If you've got your own developmental trauma, sometimes when you're in a relationship with an addict, we can go into our own trauma responses. So our inner critic or outer critic, we can get overly judgmental or we can get overly critical of ourselves. So Pete Walker, I will certainly mention, I think I've got here, I will certainly go through his new book, Holistically Treating Complex PTSD. It's awesome. But he has tools for helping to shrink the inner and outer critic. Massage or trauma release exercises. So TRE is something you can see a practitioner or learn online as a form of releasing stress from the psoas muscle, and just learning, getting, for a lot of us with trauma, getting healthy therapeutic massage is really good. Epsom salts baths, things to look after the way that stress can turn up in the body. Pastoral care. So if you're a Christian person, seek out some pastoral care, seek out some spiritual, advice, and letting others in. So that might involve a counselor, a doctor, family members. A lot of the time we will have the carried shame of an addict and we won't tell people because shame is a public emotion. So I better fix this myself. We don't need to put it on Facebook, but we can let, trustworthy people get the whole story and let people in. Regulation to connection. So how do we do it? One-on-one therapy is a good place to start. It can be a restorative relational experience that we create. That's the model I believe in wholeheartedly now, that I try and create a safe place for someone to be known and to release what's inside out and try and be useful and in the moment and connect. Group therapy can be helpful because we get to see that we're not alone, and you can find connections with others that are that are living the examined life. Not everyone wants to live the examined life. It's no picnic. 12-step meetings can be incredibly helpful, always good. It's one of my first bits of advice. Go check one out. Go to an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. See if you relate. It's one of the phenomenons of the 20th century. You've got nothing to lose by poking your head in an open meeting. You don't have to share, you don't have to contribute, you can just listen, see what you think, see how it affects you. Second half of meetings, if you go to a 12-step meeting, stick around for the fellowship. Usually they go to a coffee shop or online, they have a parking lot where you stick around and ask questions and talk, because the meeting itself, there's no cross-talk suggested, and people just share their own experience, strength and hope. So one of the early criticisms when you're new is, wow, no one talks, I don't get any advice or feedback. Well, that comes in the parking lot or after meetings at a coffee shop, etc., on the telephone. Getting a 12-step sponsor, and you can do this when you're a family member. If you go to Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, S-Anon, Adult Children of Alcoholics, you can get a sponsor to help you. Codependents Anonymous with your own program. Outreach calls, very important. People who make calls take calls, and they're hard to do. I remember learning early on in recovery, it's important to ring people. And I felt like I was asking someone on a date. It just felt so crazy. And I never came from a family where there was a lot of ongoing emotional intimacy. So ringing someone was real hard. Positive behaviors for connection. Doing other things, trying other stuff. I got a friend of mine's in a choir, he loves it. Singing with people, playing music, joining a soccer team or a sports team, just trying to, going on a walking group. There's some sort of meetup group that does something that you want to learn. I remember I took my sons to do a bowl. Where is it? Yeah, Brett Davis, the head of Christian Surfing in Australia. And we did a bowl turning thing with my eldest son, doing these activities that are about connection and wonderful. Ongoing regulation treatment. Some of us that have got trauma need to do things like EMDR or brain spotting or TRE, trauma release exercises, or trauma-based yoga. We've got to do things that help us regulate. Box breathing, stress reduction that we need to learn. It doesn't come from reading a book. We have to be in the practice of it. For people that have a Christian faith, it might be through prayer, meditation, confession, getting that pastoral care, getting people praying for you in your life. Important. How can we help when someone's really struggling? Courage and compassion. It's trying to stay in the relationship. Help to change, not help them to stay the same. So it's encouraging. I'll go to a 12-step meeting with you. I can take a call, but let's read something. Let's just sitting with somebody. We're wanting to. It's amazing how many people won't go to a 12-step meeting with their loved one. It's okay. You're welcome. It's okay for someone to turn up. I remember at a hospital I worked at, one of the initiatives I had with training was getting non-12-step people to go to a meeting with 12-step people that work there. Their first rebuttal was always, what if I see someone I know? And I always thought, well, now you instantly have more empathy for our clients, because that's exactly what they're feeling. And so when they ask you about 12-step meetings, you can say, well, I'm not an addict, but I've gone and this is what happens there, and this is how I was welcomed. So you have this lived experience. Seeking support for family from addiction specialists. Don't be afraid to reach out. People can help with interventions and getting people to treatment, getting information so you know how to respond better. Learning some of these stress reduction techniques yourself, because we need them. A lot of the time we are helping for a long time before someone does get sober. Seeking God's comfort so we can comfort. So it's that idea that, going to God, to love God with all our heart, so then we can love our neighbor as ourselves, right? If we don't have it, we can't give it. So seek that comfort for yourself. Pray and ask others to pray for you. If you are in a faith system, a religious, don't forget to pray. And sometimes it's praying against spiritual warfare. It is. Now this, if you're agnostic or atheist listening to this will sound a little crazy, but in the Christian world, we look at is this spiritual warfare that might be coming against us, and we pray against that. Stay in relationship when you can. Sometimes it's hard. They push you away. They say nasty things. They don't like themselves, so they don't like anyone else. That's reflecting. If you're loving them, sometimes feels like for them the worst thing. So stay in relationship when you can. Get help for you. Get someone you can debrief with. Don't let the shame silence you. Organize interventions if you have to. Sometimes we've got to go to above and beyond, pro-dependent approach to save people's lives. So if you need to get in an addiction specialist to train the family to then intervene with somebody, there's a variety of ways that they do that. Look into that. Don't be afraid to reach out. 12-step meetings for families. Like I said, there's fellowships for families that are helping addicts. Look for those. Addiction support groups for families. I know hospitals and treatment centers run those. It could take longer than you want. And again, an evangelism opportunity for the church family is that if there's, a lot of the time people don't know what to do, but it's a chance to speak into and try and bring comfort to families that are suffering. And it's a way that churches, I think, could actually help a lot more than they do when it comes to addicts in their community. So there's just some things that we can do. I know it's not perfect, but I hope some of that's useful. Recovery is possible. 12-step fellowships, the ones I mentioned before. Al-Anon, that's for family members of alcoholics. ACOA, adult children of alcoholics or dysfunctional families. Anyone's welcome there. Books we can get: the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the Recovery Bible, Pro-Dependence by Rob Weiss, Facing Addiction by Patrick Carnes, Another Chance by Sharon Wedgeiser Cruz, are books that I've referred to and pulled from today for this information. And the Movember campaign, you can find a Movember page on stevestokescounselingandconsulting.com, so please look that up. And that's a picture of my mum. She's still kicking, 95, and I was over there the other night trying to teach her how to use a set-top box, which nearly killed both of us, but I know where my difficulty in accepting change come from. But the fact of the matter is, on the day I got sober, I might feel emotional saying this, on the day I woke up and I knew I couldn't go any further, I told her I'm struggling again, and she booked me into the family doctor. and she got me to that appointment. And by lunchtime, I was in a facility. By that evening, I was in my first 12-step meeting. From that meeting, I've not used that addiction. Now, I've struggled. Thank God that God can use a broken man, because I've struggled. But this is, this Movember's in the spirit of a young man who lost his life through misadventure. So even though we all can struggle, we can still carry a message of hope. And my mum's not perfect. She never went to Al-Anon. She never went to Nar-Anon. She never really got help. She struggled with her own mental illness. But she loved me and got me to meetings. And I'm a different man as a result of that intervention. If she really didn't care, didn't try, just gave up on me, I probably just would have went to the dealer's place that morning and kept going. So that's why that picture's there. So thank you, Mum. And thank you to all the pro-dependent people out there that go above and beyond to help loved ones. And sometimes they don't make it, but we try and we do what we can. So keep an eye out for more Movember videos. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put the link for a donation online. I've got a Wild at Heart Fire coming up, so please look at the website and look for the John Lee talk coming up as well, that you can come in person if you would like. So with that, good luck on the recovery road, and I'll talk again soon.